welcome back. We are reading Among the Impostors. We're starting on page 84. Now, where we left off, Luke had snuck out and he sees there's some kids meeting in the woods rather, and they're talking about him. And he's wondering if they are also third children. He's also finding out about Hendrix and why the Jackal Boy, as he said, is saying he doesn't seem to have autism. He doesn't seem to have problems. He doesn't seem to. So, what type of school is this? Is it truly a regular school, or is there something else going on? Maybe we'll find out. We'll see. Now, something that's a little sad is that school's going to be ending here. This is our last week of school, and with that, I want to finish the book. Right now we've got about 88 pages left in the book. So we've got 88 pages over 5 days. I think on the very last day I think I'll aim to end this on Thursday just in case you don't get a chance to watch it until Friday. And I don't know, I guess I'll have to send out a survey if we want to keep having some read-alouds through the summer because you guys will have your Chromebooks. So look forward to that possibly coming out and we'll see what's going on there. But we're going to just read about 22-ish pages to finish up the book. So it's going to be a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but I want to make sure we finish the book, especially because it's getting so good. So without further ado, we are on page 84. Nina was another former shadow child. She had to be. Luke looked with new eyes at the group sitting in front of him in the dark woods. They must all be illegal third children using false identities. Luke's heart gave a jump. At last, he'd found others like him. He found a place to belong. Luke started to move out from behind the tree to reveal himself. Finally, he'd found other kids to talk to about how hard it was pretending to be someone else. Finally, he'd found other kids who would know how tough it was to come out of hiding. Finally, he'd found other kids he could trust as he'd trusted Jen. They could grieve for Jen with him. Then he remembered. He was almost certain these were the ones who destroyed his garden. Luke stayed put. All right, Jackal Boy was saying. Calm down. The point is, this kid, this Lee, doesn't fit any of the profiles. Did you give him the test? Nina asked. Well, there was a little problem, Jackal Boy said hesitantly. Go ahead, say it, Trey burst out furiously. I flubbed the whole thing. I don't know why you make me guard that spot. Because you're the bravest one, Jackal Boy said. Luke recognized that tone. It was the same sort of wheedling voice that Luke's brother had used on him when they wanted him to do something unpleasant, like clean out the hog pen or spread manure on the garden. They all turned and faced Nina directly. I left the door open, but I couldn't stand to be that close to it. I walked down the hall just for a minute. When I got back, this Lee kid was nowhere in sight. Left the door open? Suddenly, Luke understood. That first time he noticed the door when it was ajar, it had been a test set up by Jackal Boy's gang. But what were they testing him for? Maybe he went outside then too, Nina said. All the boys seemed to be shaking their heads in disbelief. I waited for 3 hours, Trey said. I stared at that door the whole time. Honest. Nobody'd stay out that long. Why not? Luke wondered. So, is he one of us or not? Nina asked. The question seemed to hang in the dark woods. Luke wanted to know the answer too. Who knows, Jackal Boy said. The problem is he's getting bold. Weird, like I said. We're scared he's going to get the rest of us in trouble, blow our cover. This afternoon, he just stared back at Trey like he didn't care what Trey saw or what Trey did. He was defiant, Trey said. Even Luke could see the baffled look Jackal Boy gave Trey. Sorry, Trey said. All I had to do when I was hiding was read, remember? I didn't have a TV like the rest of you. I learned too many big words. Defiant means, he was defying me. He was offering a challenge, Luke said aloud. And then he stepped out from behind the tree. Luke felt 12 pairs of eyes on him. Nina's mouth was frozen in a little O of surprise. Jackal Boy's jaw dropped in astonishment. But nobody was no more astonished than Luke. Why did I just do that? He wondered. He remembered thinking that most of the boys at Hendrix acted like pawns. I'm a pawn too, remember? Just plain old Luke Gardner, who doesn't know anything about anything, who cowers in the attic while his best friend dies for the cause. Stepping out from behind that tree was something Jen would have done, not me. But he had done it. Now what? Luke longed to slide back behind the tree again, or given that it wouldn't be much of a hiding place now, to turn tail and run. But his legs were trembling so much that just standing still took all his strength. Everyone was so quiet that Luke could hear his watch ticking again. All right, he'd gotten himself into this mess by acting like Jen. What would she do next? Talk. Jen could always talk. You destroyed my garden, Luke accused. You'll have to make restitution. Luke could use big words too. He thought he saw a glimmer of appreciation in Trey's eyes. Everyone else stared blankly. Would Jen bother explaining, or would she prefer letting them feel dumb? Garden? Jackalboy asked. What garden? That wasn't what Luke had expected. What garden? He repeated. My garden, over there. He pointed into the dark. Last night, somebody trampled the whole thing, kicked over my beans, broke off my raspberry plants. You're the ones I see out in the woods. Luke tried to let his anger carry through him, but all the faces in front of him looked vacant. Had he made a big mistake? Could they possibly be innocent? He finished weakly. So you owe me. Jackalboy shook his head. We don't know what you're talking about. He didn't seem to be lying, but how good was Luke at judging liars? I'll show you, Luke said impatiently. He suddenly had the notion that if he saw him looking at the destruction, he'd be able to tell by their expressions whether or not they were guilty. He turned hastily and started walking. He was surprised when he had heard footsteps behind him. They'd actually listened to him? Obeyed him? They made a strange procession through the woods, Luke leading the way, the other boys following with their lantern, then the girls with a dim flashlight. Luke made a few missteps and even had to backtrack once, but once he circled around, hoping none of the others would notice. Finally, they reached Luke's clearing. In the moonlight, it looked desolate, just as stumpy and straggly plants. It didn't look like it had ever contained a garden. There, Luke said, trying to sound wronged and indignant. His voice came out in a squeak. See these broken off raspberry plants? See the squash beans? But why do I have to show you? You know what you did. No guilt showed on their faces. They still looked puzzled. He is crazy, Jackalboy hissed. Wait a minute, Nina said. Did you guys walk back to the school this way last night? Trey shrugged. We might have, he said. One of the other guys spoke up. It's not like we can tell any of the trees apart. So maybe you stepped on his garden by mistake, Nina said, and didn't even know it. I certainly wouldn't know what a garden looks like, one of the other girls said. Like this? What were you growing? Nothing, Luke muttered. He was suddenly overcome with shame. He'd felt so brave stepping out from behind that tree just to make a fool of himself. Looking around, he could see how the other boys could have missed noticing his efforts and trampled his garden by mistake. This had been a pathetic excuse for a garden. He'd been pathetic for ever thinking it was anything, let alone anything worth taking a risk for. He wished he could go back and hide in the tree forever. Jackalboy started laughing first. You thought this was a garden? You were sneaking out here to make a garden? The others began to snicker too. Luke's shame turned into anger. So? He asked Define again. So you're a lecker, Jackalboy said. He was laughing so hard he doubled over in mirth. A real lecker. You always say that, Luke grumbled. I don't even know what a lecker is. Someone from the country, Trey explained helpfully. Like a bumpkin. That's what it really means. But now the word's just kind of a general insult, like calling someone a moron or stupid. Luke thought Trey sounded almost apologetic, but that only made things worse. What's wrong with being from the country? Luke asked. If you have to ask, Jackalboy said, laughing again. He had to sit down on the rotting stump to catch his breath. Luke hoped he got mold smears in his pants. Want to know something even funnier? Jackalboy continued. I'm betting you're really an X-nay too. So all those insults, lecker, X-nay, fawn roll, they're all true. I don't know that I've ever met someone who's all three before. We'll have to come up with a new word just for you. What'll it be? Luke stared at Jackalboy and the others laughing behind him. His face burned. How could he have thought for even an instant that these kids he could trust, that he might belong with them? Leave me alone, he shouted and turned and ran. Luke could hear someone crashing through the woods behind him. He didn't look back. He'd run into the darkest part of the woods, and it took all his concentration to dodge the tree limbs that seemed to reach down out of nowhere. In fact, If Luke really wanted to terrify himself, he could think one of those tree limbs as witches' arms, ghouls' fingers. He wasn't used to running through the woods at night. Back home, when he'd gone outside after dark, it'd mostly been for catching lightning bugs in the backyard, playing moonlit kickball with his brothers. Innocent fun. He'd been so young back then, back home. He forced himself to run faster, but whoever was behind him seemed to be catching up. Luke zigzagged because he'd read once that was how rabbits escaped their predators. Then he slammed in a tree. He screamed in pain and reeled backwards. A dark shape pounced. Before he knew it, Luke was pinned to the ground. Luke remembered another time he had been tackled, the first time he creeped into Jen's house. He made a noise, and the next thing he knew, she had him face down on the carpet, and they'd become friends. This wasn't Jen. "So what do you think you're doing?" a voice hissed in his ear at Jackalboy's. You go back now during indoctrination, they'll catch you. They'll know. And then they'll come looking for the rest of us. Indoctrination? Luke guessed that Jackalboy meant the evening lecture. The name made sense. The lecture was always about how wonderful the government was. But Luke hadn't even thought about what he was running towards. He was just running away. "Who will catch me?" he asked. "The only ones who watch the hall are monitors, and they all report to you, right?" "You got it," Jackalboy said. He sounded pleased. "I worked hard setting up that system. The teachers didn't like Call Duty anyway, and now you can get away with anything you want, can't you?" Luke asked. "Unless I tell." He didn't know what possessed him to make that threat. Maybe it was just habit. After 12 years of being the youngest brother, he knew the power of tattling, and he knew how easily it could backfire. "Make you a deal," Luke said quickly. "Let me up, and I won't go back now. Answer some questions for me, and I won't tell. I'll keep your secrets." Jackalboy seemed to be considering. Finally, he said, "Okay." Luke scrambled up, pulled away. He rubbed the side of his face. He wasn't sure if it was sore from hitting the tree or from being slammed against the ground. His hand came away wet. "I'm bleeding," he said accusingly. "You'll have to hide it," Jackalboy said. "Are you good at hiding?" Luke shrugged away the question. He knew Jackalboy was really asking something else, but Luke wasn't ready to answer. "What's your wet name, anyway?" Luke asked. "Which one?" Jackalboy asked. "If you look at the school records, I'm Scott Renault. Out here, I'm Jason." "One of those names is fake," Luke said. Somewhere in the woods, an owl hooted. Luke waited. Finally, Jackalboy answered softly, "Yes." "Your friends all have fake names too," Luke said. "Yes." No hesitation. "You're all third children who have come out of hiding with fake ID cards," Luke said. "Ex-nays," Jackalboy said. "What? Is that what that means?" Luke asked. "You didn't know?" Jackalboy asked. "Where have you been all your life?" Luke decided not to answer the question either. "And fawn rolls," he started, "are any third children, hiding or not." "Why does everyone at school call each other these names?" Luke asked. "Is everyone here next day?" In the dark, Luke could barely see Jackalboy shaking his head. "Haven't kids called each other ex-nays and fawn rolls at the other schools you've been to? All the other places you've ever lived? Some say in the beginning the government paid people to use fawn roll and ex-nay as swear words on TV and stuff. Then those words were forbidden in public broadcast, which meant that people used them more in private. They wanted to make sure that everyone thought of third children as terrible." Luke wondered why Jen had never told him about that. "Maybe I've never been to any other schools," Luke said cautiously. He said maybe. He could still deny everything he wanted. Jackalboy laughed, open-mouthed. His teeth glinted in the moonlight. "Why don't you just come out and admit it?" he asked. "You're an ex-nay too, I know it." Luke dodged the question. "Why do you harass me every night?" "When everyone else ignores me." "It's the procedure we developed for dealing with new boys," Jackal said. "And new girls are over at Harlow Schools for Girls. We've discovered it's hard for shadow children when they first come out of hiding. They're overwhelmed, traumatized. Think about it. They've spent their whole lives thinking it's death to be seen, and suddenly they're expected to interact with others all day long, to sit through classes with dozens of other kids, behave normally. They freak out." "Did you?" Luke asked, trying to picture Jackalboy as the new kid, just come out of hiding, scared of everything. His imagination failed him. "Me?" Jackalboy sounded surprised. "Sure, it was tough. The problem was lots of ex-nays got so panicked they'd do something really dumb. Stand up and chant their real name, start screaming, 'Don't look at me! Don't look at me!' Totally lose it. Now Hendrix has a lot of disturbed kids anyways." It does? Luke asked. Haven't you noticed? Jackalboy sounded amazed. The autistic kids? The ones who rock and won't look you in the eye? The phobic kids? We've got all sorts of troubled cases in here. Ever met Raleigh Sturgeon? There's Psycho for you. So X-Days can get away with some pretty wacky behavior at Hendrix, but the population police still got in a few good raids. That's why a lot of us X-Days got together and planned it all out. Every time a new kid arrives, we go into emergency mode until we can tell if he's an X-Day or not. We watch. We protect. Luke remembered the hands pushing him down into the chair that first day in his first class. But we do it all in secret. We give the X-Nay plenty of breathing room, and we pick just one person to approach him, to be a friend. Luke thought about having to chant I'm a Fawn roll 50 times, of having to do push-ups while everyone else laughed, of having to obey every single one of Jackalboy's sarcastic commands. I thought friends were supposed to be nice to you, Luke said bitterly. Maybe that's a word I don't understand either. Being too nice to an X-Nay from the start only causes trouble, Jackalboy said. They break down. They get weepy. They're so happy to find a sympathetic ear that they'll tell everything, no matter who else can hear. No, X-Nays need the kind of friend who can toughen them up, like I did for you. Was that what happened? Luke felt as overwhelmed and confused as he had his first day at Hendrix. Listening to Jackalboy was like it used to be listening to Jen. They were both so sure of themselves. It was so hard for Luke to figure out what he thought on his own. How can you tell if a new kid is an X-Nay or not? Luke asked, stalling. We give them a test. When they're ready, we leave a door open and make sure they see it. We stare them right in the eye. We know exactly how an X-Nay would respond, compared with a typical agoraphobe or a typical autistic kid. Got everyone figured out, huh? Luke said. Sure, Jackalboy said. Can't you tell? Luke couldn't answer the question. He was feeling panicky again. In a minute, he was going to have to make a decision. With Jen, it had been easy. He'd trusted her right away. But he was older now, more suspicious. He knew that she had to be betrayed, or that she had been betrayed. And he could be too. So you gave me the usual test, he said tentatively. Did I pass? Depends on what you call passing, Jackalboy said. Sounded cagier now. It wasn't like he wasn't sure whose side Luke was on. Luke had run out of questions. Or, he had lots of questions, but none of them would help him decide whether to trust Jackalboy and his friends with his secret. It would be so nice to be able to tell, but was it worth risking his life for it? He had already risked his life following them into the woods. Luke didn't like things like that. He missed Jen all of a sudden. She was always so good at turning his fear into a joke. Did you know Jen? He asked Jackalboy abruptly. Jen? Jackalboy said, his voice suddenly exuberant. Jen Talbot? You knew her too? Luke nodded. She was, my neighbor. I went over to her house whenever I could, he said. Wow! Jackalboy breathed. Come on. He grabbed Luke's arm and pulled him back through the woods, all the time marveling. I can't believe you really met her in person. It's incredible. She's legendary. You know? The low-hanging tree limbs didn't seem so frightening now. Luke and Jackalboy simply ducked together. A couple times, Jackalboy held a branch out of the way so Luke could go first. A couple of times, Luke returned the favor. Jackalboy kept rushing Luke along. They burst back into the clearing where everyone else was sitting, not even talking. They appeared to have nothing to do but wait for Jackalboy. Listen, you all, Jackalboy announced. This is unbelievable. He knew Jen. He went to her house and everything. There was a flurry of questions. What was she like? Did she tell you about the rally? How did you know her? Someone produced a bag of cookies and they all passed it around like a party. It was a party. It was a party where they were accepting Luke into their group, just because he knew Jen. Luke did his best to answer all the questions. Jen was amazing, he said. She wasn't scared of anything. Not the population police, not the government, not anyone, not even her parents. Luke thought about how strange it was that Jen's father worked for the population police. Mr. Talbot was a double agent, trying to help third children instead of killing them, but he hadn't been able to prevent his own daughter's death. He just barely managed to keep the population police from finding out that he had been his daughter. Luke didn't want to talk about Jen's death, just her life. She spent months planning the rally, he said. It was her statement. I deserve to exist. We deserve to exist. She wanted as many third children as there as possible, out of hiding. She thought the government would have to listen. She took everyone to the step of the president's house. Luke remembered the fight they'd had when she'd refused to go, and how she'd forgiven him. He stopped talking, lost in grief. The government killed everyone at the rally. Nina finished for him. Luke nodded blindly. He couldn't ignore Jen's death. He choked out. Jen was a true hero. She was the bravest person I'll ever know. And someday everyone will know about her. The others nodded solemnly. They know how I feel, Luke marveled. And then, in spite of his grief, he felt a shout of joy. I am one of them. I belong. After that, somehow, he was able to tell happy stories about Jen. He had the whole crowd laughing when he described how Jen had dusted for his fingerprints the first time he'd gotten into her house. She wanted to make sure I was. Luke hesitated. He'd been about to say another shadow child like her, but that wasn't how he wanted to reveal his secret. Just letting it slip out like it didn't matter. He finished lamely. She wanted to make sure I said who I said I was. So, Jackal Boy said, lounging against a tree. Who are you anyway? What's your real name, Lee? Luke looked at the circle of faces surrounding him. Jackal Boy's question had silenced the laughter, or maybe it was Luke's sudden stammering. Now everyone was watching Luke expectantly. An owl hooted somewhere deeper in the woods, and it was like a signal. Finally, it was time to tell. Luke started, but the word stuck in his throat. All those nights he'd whispered his name, all those times he'd longed to speak his name aloud, and now he couldn't. Some of the dry cookie crumbs slid back on his tongue, and he started coughing and choking. One of the other boys had to pound him on the back before Luke got his breath back. Lee Grant, Luke said, as soon as he could speak again. His urge to confess was gone. My name is Lee Grant. Sure, Jackal Boy kidded him. Whatever you say. And then Luke felt foolish. Jackal Boy had revealed his real name. Why couldn't Luke reveal his? Because, Luke thought with a chill, I didn't decide to belong. Jackal Boy decided for me. Chapter 22. Belonging to Jackal Boy's group made all the difference in the world. It began that night. Luke didn't have to creep back from the woods by himself, praying nobody noticed. He went with the others as part of the crowd. They strutted down the hall, not even trying to be quiet. What if someone hears? Luke ventured. Who cares? Luke Jackal Boy replied. Indoctrination's almost over. If there's any teachers around, they'll just think we left early to be in our hall monitor spots. They were in a brighter end of the hall now. Jackal Boy got a good look at Luke's face and whistled. You really did get all bloody. Come on, I'll take you to the nurse. Jackal Boy led Luke to an unfamiliar office, and one he'd only once seen before, when he was searching for windows. My friend walked to the wall, coming out of indoctrination, Jackal Boy told the woman who answered the door. Stupid, huh? Can you give him a bandage? My, you boys, you never look where you're going, the woman fussed. She was old and wrinkled, like the pictures Luke had seen of grandmothers. She puttered around, getting antiseptic and gauze and tape. Then she dabbed at Luke's cheek with a wet cloth. This is an awfully rough abrasion. Which wall did you run into, dear? Jackal Boy saved Luke from having to answer. Oh, he didn't get bloody from the wall, Jackal Boy explained. Kind of bounced off the wall and fell down. Then he scraped his face on the carpet. Someone might have kicked him by mistake, too. Luke's mother would have listened to an excuse like that and said, okay, now, what really happened? But this woman only nodded and tisked a little more. The antiseptic stung, and Luke had to bite his lip to keep from crying out. But the woman was quick, and his face was neatly bandaged before he knew it. Write your name and the time down in the log on your way out, the woman said. Be more careful the next time, all right? Jackal Boy even wrote Luke's name for him. Up in their room, Jackal Boy stretched and yawned and proclaimed, I don't feel like dealing with the new kid tonight. Let's leave him alone. Okay, guys? He's getting boring anyways. Luke thought some of his other roommates looked disappointed, but nobody complained. In the morning, Jackal Boy said, you can have breakfast with us. We have our own table. Hall monitor privileges. But I'm not a hall monitor, Luke said. The teachers won't notice, Jackal Boy said. And maybe you will be soon. So Luke sat at a table with the other boys. For once, he didn't have to force himself to choke down his oatmeal. It practically tasted good. And for the first time, Luke got a good look around the dining hall without feeling like he had to glance quickly and furtively. With clean white walls and a peaked ceiling, it really wasn't such a bad place. Can I ask you some questions? Here, I mean, Luke said to Jackalboy. As long as you're not acting like a real ex-nay, Jackalboy said briskly, as if he was truly swearing at Luke. But Luke caught the double meaning. It was a brilliant code. Why is this school like this? Luke began. I mean, with no windows and the strange boys, and the teachers who don't seem to notice us unless we do something wrong. And even then, they just say, "Two demerits." I don't even know what that means. Jackalboy pushed back his oatmeal and smirked. Confusing, huh? He asked mockingly, but then he started explaining anyway. Hendrix began it as an educational experiment. Back when there were the famines, people had debates about whether the indesirables in society deserved food when so many were starving. They let all the criminals die, but a bunch of bleeding heart sympathetic types said it was cruel not to feed people with mental illnesses, physical disabilities, that kind of thing. One man stepped forward and offered his family's estate to be 2 schools for troubled kids. Hendrick's school for boys and Harlow for girls. He said he'd feed them too. You see how well he's doing? Jackalboy made a face at the oatmeal. They built the schools without windows because Mr. Hendricks had the idea that kids with angerphobia, the ones scared of wide open spaces, would be better off without seeing the outdoors. He thought they'd start longing for what they couldn't see, and he thought having windows would just overstimulate the autistic kids, but he also thought it'd be good to bring in some normal kids, like role models. Luke tried to absorb all that. He thought about how differently Jackalboy acted when he was explaining something compared with how Jen had always been. Jen was always outraged, indignant over every little injustice. He could hear it in her voice, rising in disgust. Can you believe it? Isn't that terrible? Jackalboy just sounded secretly amused, almost haughty. Too bad. Poor kids. Who cares? Luke swallowed another bite of lumpy oatmeal. And the teachers, he prompted, why aren't they more, involved? Aware? Semi-intelligent? Jackalboy offered. Yeah, all the adults. Like, the nurse last night didn't seem very smart. And what's her name in the office? When I was in there the first day, it was like all the students were just a pain to her. Think about it, Jackalboy said. If you were a grown-up and you could get a job anywhere else, would you work here? We got the dregs, man. The real dregs. Luke didn't know anything about grown-up jobs. He'd never thought he'd be able to come out of hiding to have one. Jackalboy was smirking again. But it serves our purpose, all right, to have teachers who are just one step up from leckers. We can do just about anything we want. Got it? He looked around at his cohorts, the hallminders, and soon they were all smirking too. Luke wanted to object to the word lecker. Just because someone came from the country didn't make him dumb. Did it? Something else bothered Luke too. But I wanted to learn a lot at Hendrix, he said. Math and science and how to speak other languages. I've been here a month and I haven't learned a thing. I don't even know if I'm going to the right classes. I wanted to. He broke off at the last minute because he remembered he couldn't talk about being an ex-nay. He couldn't say that he wanted to just learn everything he could to help make third children legal again. Jackalboy was laughing anyway. Oh, right. We're all here to learn, he said, rolling his eyes. This made his friends laugh too. Just stick close to me, Jackalboy continued. That's how you learn what you need to know. Forget the classes, and if you're worried about grades, don't you think I know how to fix that too? How do you think we all got on the honor roll? Luke didn't know. He didn't even know what the honor roll was. But when the bell rang for the first class, he left the dining hall with Jackalboy and his gang. He felt safe now, traveling in a pack. All the hall monitors he passed gave him knowing looks, with secret nods that nobody else could have noticed. And when he hesitated between classrooms, Jackalboy was quick to tell him where to go. So that is where we will end for today, and we will continue again next time. Have a great day, guys. Bye.